to the Fascinating Womanhood channel, where we talk about all things that have to do with femininity and building strong relationships. I am Cherry Lynn, and I am usually here with my mom, Dixie Andelin Forsyth, but today we're doing something a little different. We invited some guests that have completely different time. Well, one of them has a completely different time zone than us, and it was really difficult to get me in with my schedule, with everyone else's schedule. So I'm just doing a little introduction for you all today. Our topic today is going from good to great with cooking. So we really wanted to do something for the ladies out there that are feeling pretty good about their cooking and feeling like maybe they've gotten some good staple recipes down and they're feeling pretty good about overall where they are as a cook, but maybe are ready to bump it up a little bit and get a little bit more experience under their belts. So we have some really great tips for you today. If this is what you are hoping to do as a cook, you're going to definitely enjoy all these tips. So we have, of course, as always, Dixie Andelin Forsyth. My mom is on here today. And then we also have my sister, Lisa, who's Dixie's second oldest daughter. She is here to share some of her tips as a professional pastry chef. She completed the pastry chef course at Le Cordon Bleu Culinary School, which is really exciting to have a professional chef on here today. We also have Sarah Mays, who is my cousin, Dixie's niece. She is a mother of 6 children, and she's a very accomplished cook as well as baker. She has experience working in bakeries as well. So we have a lot of experienced ladies here for you today to share their tips. Before we get into it, I wanted to share tip number 1 because it's one of my favorite tips about going from kind of basic cooking to the next level and elevating your cooking experience. So my tip, and starting with number 1, is being adventurous. And I wouldn't call myself the most experienced cook. I'm still trying to master the good to great category. But one of the things that's really helped me bump up my cooking is being more adventurous, meaning not being afraid to steer away from your staple recipes, which are great, but being confident enough to be able to say, I'm going to try to make lamb. Even though I've never made lamb, I'm going to try to make it. Or maybe for you, it's cinnamon rolls, or maybe it's cheesecake. Picking something adventurous in your daily menu is really big because it does a couple things. Number 1, it allows you to have more experience. It also helps you to have more confidence in your cooking, and it also just gives you that diversity. Being able to say that you can cook multiple things in many different ways and different recipes will only make you a better cook, and it will be something that people will admire about you, that you have such diversity in your cooking. And it's great to have staple recipes, but not being afraid to just try something new is something that will really elevate you as a cook. So that would be number 1. And, we wrote these together. So I know that the other ladies I'm about to introduce you to also can attest to how great it is to be adventurous with your cooking. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Dixie, Lisa, and Sarah. Bye.
So, hi everybody. We're here together. This is really exciting for all of us. So let's jump right into this. The first thing we have that I'm excited about, because Lisa's going to tell us about doing cream reductions. This was a revelation to me. Do you do them, Sarah Lee?
No, I've heard Lisa talk about them. But
okay, Lisa, we're excited to have you tell us about cream reductions.
Most ladies know that when you're cooking meat in a skillet or in a pan, you always get these little drippings that are left over, these little things that are stuck to the pan. And in the culinary world, those things are really valuable. You don't just wash that off your pan. You keep that and you use it. And so I think this is a French thing. They just pour straight cream onto those
drippings,
leftover drippings and sometimes there are little pieces of meat and all sorts of weird things stuck to the bottom of your pan. This is great because not only does it make a great kind of a gravy, but it also cleans that stuff off of your pan as a side effect. And then you just cook it down until it's about halfway down, meaning that what you're doing is cooking the water out of it, because there's quite a bit of water in cream. And so you're reducing it. You're literally reducing the size of how much cream you've got. But what you're doing is making it like Dixie said, you're making it thick. And it becomes a really delicious gravy that you can pour on meat. You can put it on steak. You can put it on mashed potatoes or chicken, anything. And and it works for pork, chicken, beef, whatever meat you're using. I'm sure it would work for duck or or, rapid.
When I was first married, my mother taught me a lot about cooking, but I didn't know anything about gravy because she just always made it. So I was on my own, and I knew that Bob loved gravy. I was excited. I mean, I since learned to make gravy, but this is how you can make gravy out of, we think, almost nothing. It is so, because obviously cream, it is so delicious. And people say, where did men especially love it.
Well, not to mention, it's very quick. It's very last minute. And people don't know that you just made it out of the drippings in your pan. I mean, usually when we make gravy, we're using broth and things from, a larger amount. Because you're adding cream, you don't have to have that. You just need those flavors that are stuck to the bottom of your pan. That one's a really good one. And just, season it however you like. Sometimes the seasonings are already in there because you seasoned your meat. Just kind of taste it before you serve it, and people love it. It's really good.
That's the secret to the chicken paillard recipe.
That's what I was just going to say. I'm like, I guess I have done it. That's
yes, you have.
favorite at our house.
But you can do that with other things. And if anyone wants to know about chicken paillard, we can attach something down below for that. Next, bread basics. Next for Sarah.
With this one, I figured Lisa would chime in quite a bit with this too. For me, that came to mind when we talked about doing this. And, for me, I started out marriage not knowing how to make bread well. And, sometimes it would turn out, sometimes it wouldn't. And it bothered me a lot. So I got out cookbooks and I read the introductions and, stuff before the recipes that I never really noticed before. And they had a lot of good tips and tricks. And I started to realize that I was, in even simple white bread, I was killing my yeast to start. My water wasn't the right temperature. I thought I could share a recipe later of a basic white bread that I use daily. I don't buy bread anymore. I make all our bread. So I went from not really it turning out very often to that's all I make now is bread for our family. Also, I noticed with like a simple white bread, all the breads are different as far as consistency. Like when I make sourdough, it's a lot more of a wet dough. But like with a regular white bread, I've noticed that if my dough is too wet, it ends up being a drier bread in the end. Have you all noticed that?
Not with my dinner rolls. I have them barely so that they're not so sticky that I can't work with the dough, but just barely so I can work with them, and not too dry because they turn out like lead.
It depends on the bread.
What you said about yeast too is you do not have to have warm water. You can do cold water. It just makes the yeast rise slower. I didn't used to know that you could do that. In fact, some professional bakers, of which Lisa is one, know that the slower it rises, the more developed the flavors are in the bread.
Yeah, some bakers use ice water when they start their dough. And of course, there are other breads that Sarah knows this, that you start the yeast process the day before, weeks before if it's sourdough. The slower the yeast rises, the more developed your bread will be. And really, it is better taste. So the really nice artisan breads that you buy have a slower process. And the quick ones, they say, 60-minute bread, 30-minute bread, quick rolls, they often will have double the yeast, and they will have the hottest water you possibly can have without killing the yeast. It's cheating, and it doesn't develop the yeast as well. But sometimes you need those recipes. So.
For me, it was setting little goals for myself, like I need to master this recipe, these rolls, and then I moved on to a regular daily bread, and I figured out what worked for that. Like the recipes vary so much. If you can find like an all-purpose recipe, like we used to use the 1-hour bread recipe that I think you can find online, and we use that for pizza and rolls and all kinds of stuff, and it just gives you a better understanding how to work with different breads once you master one thing and move on to the next.
And whole wheat bread is, some of you may not know, but our family, my mother, this girl's grandmother, always made homemade whole wheat bread. And Sarah's mother makes it too. And it is a wonderful bread, and it's very basic. Some people can't tolerate wheat. So if you can't, that's a whole different matter. But if you can, whole wheat bread is really good. It's really good for you, and it's very inexpensive to make it.
My chef in the culinary school described it as the yeast is munching on those wheat grains, on the fiber of it, and it just rises faster because there's more for the yeast to eat.
That's why I didn't know, because the whole recipes I have, especially the family one, it doesn't raise as long. I never knew
Mhm.
why. But when you make your own bread, if you can get to the point where you're doing that, I don't feel guilty throwing the last chunk this big away if I have a new batch, because it's so inexpensive to make it. The next one is chicken stock secret.
I do a lot of chicken stock with my husband because he really enjoys when I just cook a whole chicken. Now, again, this could be not just chicken, this could be any meat. But when you make stock, one of my big secrets, and you know, a lot of ladies probably do this, is I just add bouillon to what I already have, or you can add consommé. Now, for those of you, maybe in other countries, I'm not sure. I think other countries use bouillon too, the little cubes of seasoning. The juices that you have from your meat go further, and it intensifies the flavor a little bit.
It's already concentrated.
Yeah, it's already concentrated. Usually 1 cube is about 1 cup of water, or in milliliters, that would be, I think, 250 milliliters. So when I worked in restaurants, I discovered, and some people just know this from their mothers and grandmothers, but I didn't realize that a lot of stocks have been flavored with a variety of vegetables that they will often saute first. It helps to boost the flavor of your broth. If you can add onions, garlic, celery, carrots.
Or if you like other kinds of vegetables, just think of some of the vegetables that you really like.
Yeah.
And you can put them in there. And there's different vegetables in different countries too.
Absolutely. And, you know, just go with what you like with flavor. And then I hope everybody does this. I run everything through a strainer at the end. So if you've got all kinds of chunks of animal skin and vegetables and things, you're just flavoring this broth or this juice. And so you run it through a strainer, and then you can keep that in the refrigerator for, I'm trying to think, maybe a week or two.
Well, and you can freeze.
It can be frozen too.
Yeah.
It's really helpful to have this stuff on hand, especially, you know, I actually did this last night. Came home from work and I needed a quick dinner, and I happened to have a big thing of broth, and it was easy to make a batch of soup with that. And that was left over from a different dinner. One thing I want to emphasize is if you do cook, especially poultry, if you cook a bird, it sounds so brutal, doesn't it? If you cook a bird and you eat it and you enjoy it and everything, afterwards you've got all these bones, make sure that you never just throw those away. That can be cooked one more time to make your broth. And it's especially good if you have a rotisserie chicken that you bought somewhere. The juice on that is really good.
And remember, when you make stock or broth, you don't have to peel carrots or things like that, just garlic, you just throw it in. Okay, next.
My 2 magical flavorings that kind of solve a lot of problems when I'm cooking. The 2 things that are often missing, if I say, oh, this just doesn't taste right, the 2 things that often save a recipe are salt or lemon juice. You guys might know some other flavors that just always bump up your recipes, but salt, a lot of times if you taste your food, and people are really scared of salt these days because heart disease and all that kind of stuff, but you still need enough salt. If you don't, your food just tastes really bland and funny. It just tastes weird. So a lot of times if you just think what's missing, something missing, it's a lot of times the go-to answer is it's salt. Salt is missing. Now, some people salt way too much, and you have to be careful about that. But just make sure, especially with things like potatoes, just make sure that it has enough. Especially being married to an Iranian who they're into lemon, and they eat lemons plain. They just eat them at dinner, and they really love that flavor. And someone gave me a tip a long time ago that lemon juice actually will save almost any boring soup. This includes those cream soups, and it goes for other things too. I squeeze lemon on stir fry rice. I squeeze it on all sorts of things, and it just helps you flavor it and give it a little bit more punch.
Now you could use lime juice equally too, couldn't you?
Absolutely, yeah. Lime is great. Either of those 2 citruses. It's great for meat. It's also great as meat tenderizer. You'd be surprised how many things are improved with lemon. That's definitely my saving grace for soups.
With that, I found that even with a fruit salad, if you take your lemon juice and put like just a tiny bit of sugar, or lime juice is my favorite, put just like a couple teaspoons of sugar in there, it brightens the flavor of the fruit so much. It's kind of surprising.
Yeah, lemon's magical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so that's a good tip. I agree.
The next one is mastering rice. And so what I do when a recipe calls for rice, like cooked rice, I try to cook it in something other than water, because that will really bump up the flavor. And that's the whole idea. Everybody loves risotto, but risotto is not cooked in water. It's cooked in stock. And
another use for your stock.
Another use for stock. And anytime you cook rice, unless it just goes with just totally plain rice, if you want to bump up the flavor of your rice, cook it in something other than just water. That's just a simple tip, but that's what I do. And people think, wow, this rice is so good. It's because you cooked it in something. And with Spanish rice, or actually I've been corrected by my son-in-law, Mexican rice, I'm supposed to say just Spanish. They cook it in, I think, tomato juice. Or some kind of tomato. So it gives it a real tomatoey flavor.
Well, and here's another thing about rice, too. If you're tired of the same, a lot of us use rice cookers and we kind of just throw it in there. But the pilaf method, where you toast the rice in a little bit of oil or butter before you throw it in the rice cooker, it changes it. And you know what I've noticed about pilaf is that it keeps your rice from boiling over. I don't know if it kills all that starch or what, but I've never had pilaf boil over like I do normal
I think
rice.
it's probably because of the addition of a little bit of fat.
Yeah, makes sense.
Well, there's another thing is, remember that rice is there's not just one variety of rice. There's many varieties of rice. But there's basmati and jasmine, and then there's also sushi rice and sticky rice.
And wild rice.
Wild rice and brown rice. A lot more varieties than I even know. But when I love this one really nice Japanese variety that I don't even know the name of it, but I go to the Asian store to get it. It looks kind of like arboreal rice. It's short, round, little grains. But there is a difference in rices depending on how you're going to use them.
Well, and you can mix them. And you can add, vegetables to them. When I lived in Korea, they constantly mixed their rices. And I noticed, there's little pieces of brown rice, or there's pieces of barley mixed in with the normal rice. So.
Okay, next is me planning ahead. Not that I'm some major expert, but some of my kids think I'm pretty good at it. Because they always find me doing it. I always think about what I'm going to make ahead of time for a dinner that, especially when I'm having company, I make it part of it a day or two before if I can. I keep that in mind for how to manage it, because some meals, like to me, the worst meal to make in terms of a concentrated time is a Thanksgiving dinner with turkey and potatoes and all the things that we eat, those of us who celebrate Thanksgiving, because everything has to be done at the same time, the traditional Thanksgiving dinner. So if you can do anything planning ahead, or if you're just doing your regular nightly meals, if you can think about some meat and say, how can I, like you said, Lisa, chicken, how you can take this chicken and make it work for a couple of meals and think ahead to the next meal. Maybe you have something frozen, or if you're going to make, say, some dish, you can make more of it and freeze half of it. So another time you just have to throw it in the oven. And
make double.
If you can, make double. There's a lot of soups and casseroles if you're making anything like that, and that makes it easier. If somebody comes, like tonight, we're having company come, and I didn't know about it much ahead. I think, have I got anything in the freezer that I can pull out? And you don't have to just always start off from zero.
You know what I often do with relating to that is I love the freezer and I love pumpkin muffins. I feel like one recipe makes so much, and I take half the batter and I'll freeze it, and then you take it out and it thaws out really quickly. So same thing, like if I know that my kids are going to have a lot of play dates on a Saturday and I need snacking food, I'll have extra batter to pull out and make some quick muffins.
Do you put it in a Ziploc bag or what?
I just put it in a freezer safe container.
Okay, and then you just scoop it out?
Yep. And it'll be thawed out within an hour. Like, it's pretty quick how quickly batter will thaw out.
I do that with, I always make dinner rolls for our Sunday dinner. And so I make them always the day before, because bread is its own process. So I cut them out and put them on the sheets, freeze the raw dough the next day. If I'm going to do it the next day, you can, if you're not, you can take the pan out with all the frozen rolls on there, and you can throw them in a Ziploc bag and use them whenever you want. But I've found that once I take the little frozen rolls and put them on the sheet to thaw, it takes almost exactly here about 3 hours for them to thaw and raise. And then you bake them. So it isn't that long because it's not like a big loaf.
So you wake up and you stretch and you stagger into the kitchen, pull those out, and then do everything else. Do that first.
And so you think, oh yeah, we're going to have hot rolls, and they think you made it all that morning. And one of the advantages of not only time but cleanup, all the dishes or bowls and stuff I used to make it are long ago washed and put away. So it makes it look like you're more of a wizard. You talk a little bit about marinades. Those are interesting.
Okay, marinades. This is one of those think ahead things, and you think if you buy, some sort of meat that you think I'm going to make this on Tuesday, or if you have that thought, now is the time to put that in a bowl of marinade and let it be sitting in your fridge until it's time to cook it. Because the worst thing is the night of when you need to make dinner and you're going through the recipe book and you read the recipe and it says marinate for 2 hours or overnight. And you think, oh no, I don't have time for that. I gotta make it now. Marinades flavor your meat. They also can tenderize it. When you do this just bumps up your cooking to another level because, not that many people really do it in the average kitchen. It's nothing. A marinade could be a bottle of salad dressing if you have it. There are lots of recipes. The best ones are the ones that you make yourself and chop up things. They have things like vinegar or soy sauce.
Well, technically, couldn't you say that when you put raw chicken in buttermilk, that also helps to tenderize it? And you don't even have to put it in there for that long.
That's a marinade too. If you've had the best fried chicken in the world, that's probably the one that has been soaking in buttermilk for a few hours. If you tend to normally make some dish, try, if you want to make it a little bit better, try thinking of how you might be able to marinate that meat beforehand. Make it just a little bit better. And people think you worked really hard. Guess what? Marinades are basically no work. They are meat sitting in juice, and that's about it. It's doing all its work sitting there. It's a very easy thing that you can do that makes you seem like a chef, or turns you into a chef.
Turns you into a chef, and people say, wow, how did you do that? We're going to do one on quick desserts, because if your family loves dessert and you want to have something, or you're having unexpected company, there are quick things you can do.
I'd love to hear Sarah's input on this too. I just have a few quick things that are, you could say, the emergency desserts. And we talked a little bit about this before, where if you make a batch of cookies, make a big batch. It's not really any more work to make extra. You can either freeze or refrigerate, scoop the dough into balls if it's that kind of a cookie. A lot of people do this, and you can buy refrigerator cookie dough in this sort of form. Well, some cookies are slice cookies where you refrigerate it in a big log, like in plastic wrap or foil, and then you slice it off. But the ones I tend to make are scooped with an ice cream scoop, and it's very fast. You don't need to really roll it with your hands or anything like that unless you're a perfectionist. And what's great is you can choose how many cookies you need. If my husband comes home from work and he just needs a little snack, I might cook 3 cookies. I'll just pull them out and quickly bake them. And like Sarah's pumpkin muffins, it tastes just as fresh as if you mixed it the day of. Nobody knows if you're baking it that day that you made the dough ahead of time. It's a really great emergency. And when you have cookie dough, you can cook it up in a skillet. Have you heard of pizookie? I think it means pan cookie or something like that. You just cook it up in a skillet and put ice cream on it and serve it in the skillet.
Oh, just a real obvious one to me is like ice cream that you can make homemade toppings. And those make a very quick dessert, because you can have the ice cream, you can make it from scratch, or you can buy it, which most of us do, and have a homemade caramel or fudge sauce, which makes it very special. And just put it in a pretty dish, and that makes a great dessert. What about you?
Those are really fast.
Honestly, both of the things you mentioned were what were in my mind. I always keep cookie dough on hand. Like because we don't eat a whole batch, and I don't want my kids to eat a whole batch, so I freeze the extras. And if I have people coming over, it's awesome to have even a variety. You could have some triple chocolate cookies, some regular chocolate chips, and peanut butter, and you have this assortment, and they're like, wow, you know.
Wow, you went to so much work.
Yeah, I did. I slaved. And same with the ice cream. I was thinking about one time we went to a friend's house and they just made a quick brownie. They put, you know, the store-bought ice cream. I don't make my own ice cream personally, but they just made some caramel sauce in a pan and cut up some bananas and had a caramel banana sauce to put on top of this brownie and the ice cream. And it was fantastic. And it was so quick, you know. So I think about sauces too, like a strawberry or a chocolate sauce that you can quickly do.
Well, another thing I've done is I make, like cookies, I make cupcakes ahead. I'll make a very big cupcake batch. And then before I ice it, I'll take the cupcakes out, and the ones I don't need that day, I freeze them. And once they're frozen, I can put them in a bag.
Yeah, actually a really important thing to understand about cake is that it freezes very well. In the cake industry, a lot of times when you buy a cake, it has been frozen or refrigerated, and it actually sort of improves over a few days. If you eat cake the first day, it's a little bit, sometimes a little dry, but it tends to sort of, all those flavors go together, and the texture tends to improve over a few days. So you can definitely make cake ahead of time and frost it later.
And one of the things you taught me, Lisa, you might want to comment more on this, is a tip of making your cakes more moist, which I did not know until you told me.
Sarah, you know this tip?
I know this joke.
You have a joke? Oh, that word.
You love that word.
I hate that word.
She hates the word moist. But there's no other word, so that's what we use.
If you've noticed that homemade cakes that you make from scratch they tend to be a little more dry, and you'll see that the professionals use simple syrup to soak their cakes. And there's somebody online, How to Cake It, if you've seen that on Facebook. There are these girls that do these quick, time-lapse videos that shows them making cakes, and you can always see them squirting this liquid.
Tell them what a simple
their
syrup
cake.
is.
I will. Simple syrup is basically equal parts sugar and water that have been boiled to dissolve the sugar. That's it. And you can put vanilla in there. You can put extracts, flavorings.
You can put lemon juice,
yeah,
lime juice.
Yeah, or any fruit juice in there. It's a neutral flavor. It's just a sweet water, basically. So you can put any flavor in there. People put liqueurs, put coffee in there. Then you would just squeeze it onto your cake, and it adds back that moisture that it needs. Now, not all cakes are like that. If you buy a cake mix, I don't know if we're getting too technical, those are high ratio cakes, which means they have a higher ratio of sugar and fat to flour, so they're already softer. I'm not going to use that word. They're richer and softer, and they don't need to be soaked because they already have fat and sugar considered softeners in the cake world.
If you want a cake that is not crumbly and dry,
that you make yourself, especially white cake. White cake tends to be really dry if you make it at home. You need that soak. You need that simple syrup, and it's good to do that ahead of time. And what's great is it actually boosts the flavor of your cake.
Now, one more quick dessert is that we thought we'd say just a minute about is puff pastry, because you can make really quick desserts with puff pastry that you can buy frozen. The instructions are on there. It makes it look really fancy when you actually haven't worked that hard. But you can make puff pastry from scratch, but it's not quick. It's not easy. But remember, when you buy puff pastry, I haven't known this that long, the puff pastry you buy in the store, not usually made with butter. And that's why it doesn't taste as good as some of the bakery stuff. If you want the kind with butter, I finally found some, but it was like several times the price of the regular.
There's a reason they use not butter.
There's a reason they use, I don't know, I assume it's shortening or something. I don't know what it is, but it's not.
Hydrogenated vegetable oil, usually.
Yeah, which is not butter. Puff pastries, when you make it from scratch, that's why it's so delicious. It's because it's made with butter. But you can, in some places, find the kind made with butter. But the one I found was like $14 as opposed to $4 of them. So it's like, I think I'll pass this up. The next category we're going to talk about is, and we can all contribute to this, is crock pots and Instant Pots. I have more experience with crock pots. How about you guys?
Crock
Never
pot.
used an Instapot.
Yeah.
Use Instapot?
But I have friends that used Instapot and absolutely swear by it. Really love it and how fast it is.
Do you use it, Sarah Lee?
So someone gifted me one. It was very sweet of them, and I tried it, but for me it was kind of relearning how to, cook with a different appliance. So I like the crock pot because it's something I plan ahead more. I think, I can leave this in and get it out later, instead of the quick, I'm going to make a turkey in my Instapot and it'll be done in an hour.
One thing that Instapots are fantastic for is beans, dried beans.
I've heard that.
They're fantastic. If you like making chili or just refried beans or any kind of beans that take forever to cook, they're fantastic in an Instapot. But crock pots are an absolute revelation. People that have to work all day, you can throw stuff in the morning. You come home, and as you walk in, it's like someone's been cooking for you while you're gone. And on the weekends, if you're not working or the days you're not, you can put little packets together of stuff and freeze it and just throw it in there. If you cook meats on low and slow all day long, you can tenderize almost anything. And
it's good for cheap cuts of meat that are not
very cheap. And remember, when you're cooking,
makes them taste expensive.
especially cheap cuts of meat, if you want to make sure they're tenderized, put some sort of acid in there. And that will help tenderize. It can be wine. It can be like soy. Soy has a lot of acid in it. Tomato.
Any citrus.
Any citrus has a lot of acid. And one of the reasons that wine is used so much in cooking meats is because it breaks the meat tenderized.
On that note, one time Sam made a bunch of grilled steaks. He wasn't happy with them. And there were a whole bunch of them. And Mom said, don't throw them out. And she took them and put them in a crock pot and added, I think, some broth to it and just slow cooked it. And it was the best shredded beef I've ever had.
So remember that too. Now here's a really fun one. We're getting towards the end here. Cooking with your man in mind. These are recipes that men tend to love as opposed to ones that men tolerate, like entree salads. Most of the men I know their favorite is not an entree salad. They're more substantial kind of comfort foods. Sarah, you've been known in the family to be really good at this. I've heard some raving stuff about you.
I'm flattered. I know that someone brought up this one time. My husband Ryan had a bunch of friends and some of my relatives over, and they were watching a football game, and I needed something quick to make them. So I took a basic white bread and I did like a monkey bread. So I did one monkey bread that has, the cinnamon and sugar pieces and like a caramel sauce, and that was the dessert that I made for them. And then I took the other half and I made a pizza pull-apart bread, and I took the chunks of dough and I rolled it in Parmesan and some Italian seasoning, and I just put mozzarella cheese and
Did you use pasta sauce in there?
So what I did was I tossed it in the cheese and the pepperoni and the Parmesan and the seasonings, and you just pile it in the bundt pan and you bake it and you flip it out and I took a little cup and I put some hot sauce in it, and so they'd pull it apart and dip it in there. And it was just, I brought it out and they just all raved over it. They thought it was the most fantastic thing, but it was so simple. And a lot of girls I know, when they do those pull apart breads, they use store-bought rolls. You mean
canned biscuits? Canned biscuits?
You can use canned biscuits, but I know a girl who gets the frozen rolls from the store and she thaws them out and cuts them up and does a pull apart bread. But it was so simple to have the sweet bread and the more entree to offer at the same time.
Remember, ladies, that any presentation is important. If you just put a big pot on the table, the food doesn't look near as good as if you present it well.
Mm-hmm.
In a soup tureen or something.
But like the pull-apart bread is in usually a bundt pan, so when you turn it out, it's pretty.
It was pretty, and and you could do more with it. You could put even veggies in it. You could put like some green pepper mixed in with it and things like that. But it's a lot of fun to experiment with the idea of a savory pull-apart bread. And
Sounds really good.
When you talk about presentation, one time I was serving up pie, and I gave Brian a piece of pie, and it was flopped on its side. He acted so disappointed. And at the time, my dad was telling him how spoiled he was, and he said, "John, look at my pie. It's upside down. I don't have it all perfect in my life," you know. But he was being such a tease, but it was so funny. I know.
Well, you know, something that my husband really loves, I discovered it almost by emergency because I needed to do something in a hurry, is he just loves when I cut up potatoes into chunks. I don't even skin them. I don't peel them. I just get really thin-skinned potatoes, cut them in chunks, throw them in a bag with some oil, shake it, spread it out on a cookie sheet, salt and pepper it, and bake it. And it's kind of like French fries. When we had friends over, he said, "Are you going to make those potatoes?" And I thought, oh, he likes those. So it's the easiest, fastest thing. And I actually do this after work because I shower after work. And so I quickly cut the potatoes, throw them in the bag, put them on the sheet, stick them in the oven, and then they bake for depends on how big the chunks are, but they bake for about 40 minutes. Mm-hmm. I shower while they're in the oven. Mm-hmm. And they just do their thing.
And they smell good while they're baking.
They smell great, and they're cheap, and it's easy to make a whole bunch. But here's the other thing is you can do this with carrots. You can do this with all sorts of vegetables. You can do it with yams. Squash. Yeah, there are a lot of things. Broccoli, there are a lot of things that if you just throw them in a bag with a little bit of olive oil, salt and pepper it. I don't know about other countries. In America, we tend to boil a lot of our vegetables. But there's an alternative with fresh vegetables, and that is roasting in the oven. Just toss them with a little oil and roast them. And a lot of the work is done for you. It takes a long time for you to burn them. It's almost foolproof. Just don't turn your oven too high. But roasted vegetables is a big lifesaver for me. Yeah. And they seem fancy, but they're not. They're just very quick to make. You just chop and bake.
So instead of just opening up a bag of chips and dumping them in a bowl, with a very little work, you can make something from ordinary to great, and it's better for you.
You know, when you're cooking too, if you're cooking an entire meal, it helps to have something that's taking a while over here while you're doing the labor-intensive stuff. Like if you're cooking burger patties or something, or you're making spaghetti or whatever, and you have to tend whatever you're cooking. It helps to plan ahead. I'm going to make rice with this. If you have a rice cooker, turn that on and leave it while you do the other stuff. So think about when you make a meal, what kind of cooks itself while you're doing the hard. You can kind of plan ahead that way.
Right. The last thing we have on our list that I really love this one is making your own simple things like croutons. The bought croutons are awful compared to homemade. So
Sarah, like rocks.
Tell us how you do croutons, and it's a way to use up leftover bread instead of throwing it away.
This is why they invented it, I'm sure.
Yeah, probably. I found that when I make bread, sometimes we go through phases where I make bread almost every day, and then we go through phases where, oh shoot, like this loaf is almost too dry to eat. So I started cutting it up and making a batch of croutons. It was one of those little additions to something that's ordinary, and my husband just was so happy. It was just the tiniest thing, and he doesn't really say a lot, oh, that food was so fantastic or anything, but you can tell that just boosted a meal. But for me, what I do is I just cut it up into the regular chunks, and I put it on a cookie sheet, and I drizzle it with olive oil and some seasonings. Typically, I do Parmesan. You can do powdered or the shredded. And I would do like an Italian seasoning and salt and pepper. And even like bump it up with a little more garlic powder or salt. My husband loves garlic. You just slow cook it like on 375. I think it doesn't take more than like 15 minutes. And one of the things I like the most is I can control how hard they get. I like them a little bit more chewy. You can slow cook them to where they're a softer crouton, but it'll last for weeks in your pantry. Just store it in a bag.
And sometimes men like to snack on them like popcorn.
He'll snack on them a ton.
Yeah, they're good. Because you wouldn't take the kind from a bag you buy and want to munch on those. They're hard as rocks. Yeah, and they don't have much flavor. You wonder how old they are, the ones you buy in the store.
They probably
You'll never know.
You'll never know. But you know how old the ones you made are. So, and if you have a simple salad with just lettuce and a few things, if you have homemade croutons, it bumps it up to be a special salad.
I feel like when I make a Caesar salad, it's the thing that people talk about the most. You know, I can put some fresh Parmesan cheese in there, and you could put chicken, and people are like, we've had several people over, and they always comment on the croutons. They say, those were fantastic.
You're like, that was my old bread. I used fresh chicken, and you're talking about my old bread.
Yeah, because it's not, that chicken was great, or this dressing. It's the crouton, and it's so basic. They're so easy to make. It's silly.
It's really easy. And that way you don't feel guilty throwing out stale bread. Well, thank you, ladies. Thank you for joining us. And for everybody, you can like, comment, and share our videos. We're here every week and got more tips, and we'll do some more another time, and we'll include some of the recipes below. So thank you for joining us. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.